Well, welcome to part two, and a special welcome if you watched part one to get here. Now, we've narrowed it down to two very similar boards. This next bit is pretty well much laying the rest of the groundwork for the other portions that we're going to do when we start building this, including selection of memory and, of course, everything associated with building out the disk space, the storage space. Now, yes, we would like to have the full power of like the Taichi Aqua. That sounds really good, but I don't have a spare $800 to throw at something if I can get by with something less. At the same point, I don't want to buy too low, because if I buy too low, I find out I'm really missing some capabilities, or perhaps it has some unique features like we've already kind of discussed when we looked at the Aqua versus the Taichi Lite, I guess it was. We see there's some differences on how things are implemented. So let's go back and look, and we're going to continue this conversation about what would make one of these two boards that we've selected $50 more premium than the other one. Because remember, if you Google Taichi Aqua, you might find out that people are asking, was it $1,000 mistake, or was it, a real something special? Well, now if you look for it, it's under $800, but by the time you put tax on it, it's going to be close to, as of the day of this video, it's going to be close to $800. So it's come down because of the state of the economy, I think. But the question is, how do we get just enough birthing person board to get our job done with some future proofing without spending too much now or too little now and getting, finding ourselves falling short? That's it. Oh, and by the way, remember, buy some coffee. We got a website up here, and I'll just put the QR code and be done. The same, supports Intel volume management support. So you get the idea. There's a little bit different. What else is the difference? Because somewhere there's $50 difference in the value. And if you will follow me over to the center panel, I'll explain to you something. And I'm not saying one's better than the other. I'm saying one can be definitely better for you of these very similar boards and not be better for me, or vice versa. It depends on what you want to do with your computer. I'm not gaming. I'm just doing videos, so I want that effect. Either one of them, I think, will do that. There might be something a little bit different that we'll get into, but let's go check some stuff out, and then we'll go into overtime, because if you'll stay late for class, students, I will share my old man observation to you in my own unenigmable fashion. Are you ready to go to the center panel? Come with me to the center panel. So now I have them pulled up side by side. The Phantom Gaming, that's giving you what they're intending for this to be used. And it has all this color. And I think if I have it pulled up, because one of these websites I patched this on, I have a bar at the bottom where I run the contact to keep me out of trouble. This definitely says Phantom Gaming Z890 Nova Wi-Fi. All right, so we know what that one is. That's the colorful board. If we go up to the top, it won't let me go up to the top zoomed in like this, because it blew this large for telephones, for mobile devices. But there's a lot of color on the top of this board, and the color here, we'll notice some differences over here on the Taichi Lite. Let me go ahead and pull it down to make sure that you see Taichi Lite. There we go. Roll that up so it can be seen on the real estate channel called Elder Cell. Drop that down. Let's see how low I can go. Now, this is what this is saying. On that whiteboard on the Aqua, it said if PCIe 1 or 2, whichever one it was, if you occupy it, it takes out one of the drives over here. Well, we're over here on a similar board, right? So we want to be very careful before we spend money on our M.2s and that kind of stuff, that once we select a board, that we don't end up losing a feature that we were buying the board for. Like some of the Z790 boards, if you wanted PCIe 5, like you wanted to run the next generation, the 50 series NVIDIA cards that run on 5.0, you would get the benefit of twice the speed. And that's going to be a lot faster. This one that I have out here, we'll talk about something in just a second. This is a 4070. It's not a cheap card. It's also what's giving me some heartburn between Asus and me, and it's my fault because I thought I had something exactly right and it wasn't. But this is geared more towards a smaller form factor, a smaller computer. It only has the 2 fans, they're 92 millimeter fans. They don't have the extended cooler on this side. Underneath it, the boards are about the same. It's just they have maybe a little bigger cooler so you could drive it a little harder. That's a PCIe 4.0, and it's a lot faster than this little bad boy, this is a 1050 Ti. It's circa 2007, 2008. Been a good card. It'll run 3 different monitors. You don't see this antique guy anymore, although I still have a running monitor that has one of those. A DVI, I think that's called. So it's an old card, and it's even slower than that. So each time we go up with the PCIe, we double the speed. So PCIe 3 is twice as fast as PCIe 2. 3 is half as fast as 4. 4 is half as fast as 5. So when we look at these things right here, this top slot is usually on most boards. If you have PCIe 5.0 on it, it's going to be in this top slot. And why is that? Well, because that's also where above that is where we're going to find if we can do PCIe 5.0 on the hard drive here, this solid state hard drive that's under this heatsink. That's where we're going to find it. It's going to be right here, right above this, between this slot and the processor, because that's where it's fed out of. It's fed off of the processor. Let me see if I can get this down a little. It won't go any lower. This is really annoying up here, but we see that that's how that works. We also see with these boards, we got 4 DIMM, SODIMM, or whatever slots we have. When you look for your birthing person board and you're looking at the spec, look for those little notes, like we seem to have read that we lost one of the slots down here, one of the M.2 slots down here. Now, let's look at what we see. It's a little bit of difference here. This appears, we go back and look at the spec, appears to be a toolless heatsink removal. Now, I got a water block for this one for my 5.0, for my Gen 5 SSD. It right here is going to have a water block on it. So I'm going to take that out. It makes no difference to me. This one looks like it also has a quick release. We look at the Nova, and it looks like it also has a quick release, a push button. We can't say. We'd have to look it up for sure. Does look like there is a retaining screw just to make sure that it stays down, pushed down. We'd have to verify what that's holding. It may be actually holding that button for all I know. Like that has 2 holes. This has 2 holes. This one, you can't see any holes. It's too blurry of a jumpy picture. But we get the idea. This is one big slab covering everything. A lot more lights. This one is 2 pieces, and if they screws are what holds it down, and it appears they do, this is not a toolless heatsink. Is that good or is that bad? You know, that's the problem. Most of us run around trying to put a quality to everything. You can't just say something is. What is the glass? Is it half full or half empty? It's a half a glass. That's accurate in anybody's book. Oh no, you have to, Dell. You have to determine if it's half full or half empty. Why? It's just a half a glass. If I want space to put some more fluid, it's good. If I'm running out of fluid, it's bad because I only got half. It's your context. And that's the kind of stuff that absolutely drives me bananas in this world. People want to make something good or bad without any discussion whatsoever. So this is screw down appears. This appears to be one big slab. Now, why I might like this is we have 3 SSDs that could be potentially populated under this plate. And if we do that, if I want to change one over here, one of these 2 that still exist in this place, you know, I might not want to disturb my heat transfer tape, my thermal tape that I'm using to contact this piece of aluminum. I might not want to keep monkeying with it every time I want to pull a drive out. Maybe I want to mirror one or something like that. I pull it to an external device. Well, I can leave that be. This one on this side, one little push button looks like it releases this heatsink. Maybe it's not a problem. Maybe it is. I don't know. Now, underneath this is, I believe, where our chipset is going to live, and it's going to live under this one too at this point in time, I believe. But what's different is, what can we put here or there? I want you to have in your mind some very little difference with this heatsink, and then we're going to come back and talk about something else. Okay, did you make the trip with me after that video edit? All right, this is our 1851 CPU socket. It's different than the LGA 1700. There's only one series of processors that's going to fit this board at this point in time because it's the first generation, and that's going to be your Core Ultras versus your Core. Your Cores are your 12th, 13th, and 14th generation. But you see what we have similarity between the two. Our Gen 5 by 4-lane is going to live between our video card and our processor, just where we expect it. This actually drives and controls the Gen 5, and this drives and controls this. Down here in the chipset region of the board, right down in here, we see underneath this, they've glowed, they've ghosted where our positions of potential M.2s, right? So this is where they go. They can go up, and this one can have up to 5 down on the bottom, and this one have up to 5, same spot. But here you see that difference, what I was saying just a minute ago. This is open. You don't have, if you wanted to use an aftermarket taller heatsink, maybe you've got a real fast one that's here, or it's just of a manufacturer that radiates a lot of heat, and a flat connection like this isn't doing it for you, or you're pulling this thing off and on and they're all getting a little bit hot. Maybe this is better if we do it this way, because we could use an aftermarket here or here, providing it's not interfering with our video card. And our video card is going to slot in here and hang over this side. This one will take different sizes. This one, I think, will only do a 2280 on this side, but we can verify that at any point in time. But see, it's open. And so if you might be wanting to pull drives out for one reason, maybe you want to run a different operating system, and you want maybe Windows or your main system up here, Linux up here, and run your Windows off of a different one down here. It's important to notice if you had a notification in that specs that says, be careful if you put a video card in this slot right here, which would also mean any other card that would use the PCIe 4. If you put something here, it may disable the chipset, may then disable one of these drives. Well, that could be a big deal if that's a slot you're using. It can make you wonder, oh no, I put a card in and now it won't boot, or it won't run, or I've broken it and I don't know why, and I take it out. You might find out that it's in the chipset, or the way that board has been put together, that says, okay, you can have your cake, you can have your pie, but you can't have your cake and pie together. And that's the problem that we had with some of the PCIe 5 stuff on the LGA 1700 processors and 700 series chipsets. If in a lot of those, if you went Gen 5 with those 4 extra lanes, for that SSD up top to give it that super twice as fast as any Gen 4. If you did that, then you would go down, you would cut down the mode to a lower bit rate on the card itself. You know, it's going to use half the lanes because it's pulled half the lanes to run the other device, the memory, right? Does that make sense? All right, that's my understanding of it, and I'm not the sharpest knife in the drawer. So you want to read to make sure these are independent, and I can go into the chipset in more detail to explain it, but that just gets me up to this right here. See this? This has an easy release, and this is something that you can use to potentially pull your video card out to release it without causing damage. It's a little thing right here. A lot of the newer boards are coming with this, but olden cards, days on end, we were like this, and you have to push down on these little ears right here to release the card out of its lock. Okay, this one still has one here, one here. Guess what? Over here on the Nova, it does have the second slot, PCIe 2, does have the same release. Only on the primary one that we're probably going to run our video board in, our GPU right there. Well, if I get it closer to the screen, and if it will focus, you will see, all right, that there's just a little notch. That's where that latch catches that video board, and here are our connectors up on the top, right? Beautiful. All right, we want to keep these statically free. This is an old 1050 Ti board. This is an old one. And if I were to put light behind this, where you see the end of that green masking on your side, I could actually cut that off and it wouldn't cut a trace. There's nothing in there. I do have, if you can see there are some chips in that area, so we want to be careful we don't damage that. Here on this new board, this very expensive, what is this? This is a 4070. We still have that same locking mechanism. Let me get some whitening behind it. All right. Let me put my hand, there we go, look on the monitor. See it? Right there, ASUS has put black mask on the board, but it still has that same tab. Well, when we look at a lot of these newer boards, you will find that for some reason, graphic card assembly manufacturers are running traces right in that area, in that general area, that if we crack it, if we run a crack up there, it's going to wipe out a lot of chips, going to break them. You can check a guy's YouTube website of Northwest Repair. He does a lot of fixes on that. That may be a very, let me get my beard in the way. That might be a very significant thing to have a good release, because if you don't release your video cards carefully, when you screw them, you can screw up your video card and ruin it. And if it happens to be more than a $200 card, if it's closer to $1,000 or $2,000 card with a water cooler on it, it could be worth watching this video just to see, to not step on thin ice, to not do something like that. If you like this content, please go to calldelltosell.com, find the tab that says on YouTube, click it, and it'll open up a page of QR codes. There you can use a smartphone to scan and get to the YouTube page, or you can just mouse over and click it on a PC. There you'll be able to subscribe to this little button over here and click the notification bell so that YouTube will notify you. Thank you. That might be a very significant thing to have a good release, because if you don't release your video cards carefully, when you screw them, you can screw up your video card and ruin it. And if it happens to be more than a $200 card, if it's closer to $1,000 or $2,000 card with a water cooler on it, it could be worth watching this video just to see, to not step on thin ice, to not do something like that. Now, if we look at this card, let me get my little face up in here. I got me a little piece of paper. Maybe this will work. All right. You see that little notch up at the very top? It's got two notches. It's got a screw notch here, and then the two little pointy part. The card will go in your computer like this, I'm sure you know, and it catches at the bottom and it catches up at the top, and whether they have screws or they have a little flop over thing like some of the cases have that lock them all down, there's probably going to be something there. So you'll take that loose and it'll be wedged on the bottom and it'll be stuck because it's got friction on the gold contacts up in here, and you're fighting with it and you're pushing with it, and next thing you know, you pull too hard and you break that little tab right there. So we're still not yet to find out which one of these two almost identical boards, the gamer board or the more of the business or the work type board, which one of them is the higher price board. Now let me tell you something I invented not long ago, because this card is not that big a deal. It's short. Do you see how this is? Where the card ends, it's a one-phase model, and so it's right there to push that little release that we looked at, that we talked about. Pull that up there. It's right here. The card, it stops about where this little spot right here is. So for this card, the little card, it was never a problem because you could easily get to that card and flip it down. Now that we have a larger card going in, let's go back to the big screen. You see, this is kind of in the way. This extra part of the cooler and the board is just kind of in the way. So how would you get it out? Well, I'm not giving you any advice, but I'll tell you, one day I broke a wooden spoon, a typical dollar store wooden spoon. I don't know how I broke it. I don't know. I really don't. How do you break a wooden spoon? I don't know, but I did it. And anyway, so I took it and I sanded off the spoon part of it, and I use it for a little scraper on my pots, like you would a spatula. Sometimes all the spatulas are dirty or whatever, and so it's just a little duckbill portion of it. But then I was left with a stick portion, and it's a pretty decent diameter. And I took it out to the shop and I sanded down, put like a little 30-degree or 45-degree wedge on it and rounded it so it was no shrapnel coming out anywhere. And now I can take, this happens to be a chopstick, so you might try a chopstick. You can go down between, and I'll go ahead and put that back up so we can see what we're talking about. Bring it up. Right there, you can take a wooden stick with that big video card sitting in this area right here, sitting over this thing right here. It makes it kind of hard to get to either one of those ears, which is why this is such a treat if you have a big video card, because you can pull back on this and it helps release it. That's what that's there for. Easy release, they call it. Well, this one doesn't have it. But what we can do, what I have done, because the Z790 board we're producing this video on right now has that 3060 and it has a 2-fan. It's bigger than the TI, than the 10, this one, the 1050. I can take it and go right down between that M.2, that and that video card, and push down on that on the ear. And if it were to slip off, it's wood, you see. It's wood. It's not like you're pushing off. You're doing something stupid. You got like a metal scrapey, super sharp screwdriver, anything dumb like that. You wouldn't want, what else I got here? You wouldn't want to use metal scissors to push down on it. You get the idea. Might use something like a hairbrush, but it won't fit the end of a hairbrush. Toothbrush, maybe something. You just don't. If you want to push down on it from above, you want to make sure that if you were to slip off, you reduce the likelihood that you scratch the printed circuit that might be below. It may just be a ground plane or something under it. I don't know. It may be okay, maybe it won't be okay. But it's a bad thing to do. And we talked for a long enough period of time of why it's important we don't break those little tabs off trying to get a video card out, because you need to, guess what? Perhaps you need to get to your boards up under here, your M.2s up under here, right? Now, if my card is filling over this space, it might be that these are easier to access without taking all of them off. I don't have to break the seal that the thermal pads are making to my M.2s if I use it over here. This one I do. It's easy. I can pop it off, but what is it to it? And as I said, they have the same memory specs. This looks very similar setup with the same glow over, the same blue glow over, but it does say here Z890 Taichi Lite. And over here it does say Z890, and there's a little bit of a Nova down there. But you can see some very, very similar reaction here. You can see the color on the top, You can also see that this does have the easy release here, whereas this one, you have your little ears right there. Here's a better picture where they're showing you in a video how this easy release works. It pulls back and it unlocks it, and you put your thumb right here, your finger, and pull out this. And see, this is clear of the M.2 above it, the space above it, and yet it's below your memory sticks that are going to sit right there. You see how that works? So this is I know it's a piece of plastic, but that's a pretty neat little piece of kit there that they put on the board. All right, we have here, it says extra large M.2 heatsink with toolless design. The extra large aluminum alloy M.2 heatsink with toolless design is a user-friendly quick release mechanism that helps installing M.2 SSDs super easy and simple. And then we have that's the push button there, I'm sure. If it's not, if it's not a push button, it may be a little screw button that's captive to the system. But either which way, it comes off quick. That's the whole point of that. And we see how big that big Hawking piece of aluminum is. Of course, it's got a lot of pretty right there, but you get the idea. We can't get to these two that we see on the other side. Let's go to the other side. Enlarge M.2 heatsink. And then we look at it, it says anti-drop screw. So I imagine that these guys are probably captive, so that that you don't lose them or drop them into your birthing person board. I about messed up. And we do see real easily that this part, if it's showing up on camera, I have right here, this is the socket portion of it, and we do have a screw tab right here. So this looks like it's only going to do 2280s or whatever it is, the M.2s, yeah, 2280. So it's the big ones are going to fit here. Where on the vertical one, we did have a couple of other screw holes there. And can we go back over real quickly to the specs here in the gray spot? Now, if we look here, it says one blazing M.2, M2.1. This is the one that you're going to look on your manual and to see which one of those slots it fits, but that's the number one. Supports 2280 Gen 5.4. We know that one was the upper one between the PCIe slot and the CPU. All right, they both have that. The one below that is the M.2, it says. It also runs off of the CPU. So this is what we want to watch. If we were to populate the board, we want to make sure that we don't end up compromising our data rates to our M.2s by where we put our video card in. And like I said, in my case, my 4070 is PCIe 4, so it really doesn't matter if it slows down a little bit, but if it goes from 16-bit to 8-bit, be prepared to understand in the manual, that little section right there of whatever board you have, what runs off of the CPU and what runs off of the chipset, okay? That's what I was kind of trying to explain, and I may not have done a good job. Now here we have the chipset down on this side, and I can do it on this side if you prefer, if we like the gaming computer better, all right? It says the one hyper, M.2 at 3, 4, 5, and 6. So when we saw on that layout, you would have to pay attention on your manual which one is a 5, 6, or whatever, so that if you did in fact have a board that if you plugged in and used that lower slot on the board, one of them, the Aqua, said it turns off one of the M.2 spots. It said it was number 4. Now I don't know if they're numbered exactly the same, but you would look at your manual and realize, well, gosh, you know, that's what I was saying about that scenario. You put something in that lower slot, and now you can't boot the machine. You think you blew it up. You think you did something bad, and then you pull the card out, and it goes back to working because maybe that was your boot drive that happened to be in that slot that gets disabled. So sometimes it's not that it slows it down. It may turn it completely off. Here are two of the cooling slides they have on the page, and if I slide this up, you see the little purpley spots, 1, 2. They're talking about your headers for your PWM type of connections to your cooling fans. Look how many they have on the gaming, so that you don't have to run splitters and you don't have to be as worried about overloading something, because we know the gamers like buying fans for to get the lights on them. So you have a lot of fans. So they got 3 here. These will give you which ones are PWM and which are 5 volt, which are 12 volt type versions. They'll tell you what, some of these are rated for the CPU pump. They're rated probably 3 amps instead of the 1 amp, that type of thing. Now we go over to the counterpart on, let me get that repositioned. So we see intelligent cooling design. We'll look at what the Taichi Lite says. Intelligent cooling design. Oh, but see, the gamers got these little brackets. That must be that's whoever web designed it did a different font too. So we see it's cosmetic. It's just all cosmetic until we get to this. Now I do want to pull this up. Look at the VRM area, and I'll pull the gamer, the Phantom Gamer up here as well. See, this is a pretty good size heatsink, very similar. That says Nova. This is, I'm sure, to say something, and it talks about the other. But notice on the M.5. This is a little bit different of a heatsink. There's a lot more metal up here. This is leading me to believe that this little component is probably a little more expensive than this one here. This is a little smaller, a little flatter, both aluminum. This one is easy release, looks like. This is easy release. So this may very well cool your Gen 5 drive better and give you a much better performance if you're hitting something really, really hard. Now, a lot of times you're not necessarily hitting your M.2 for a gamer. You're not necessarily hitting it all that hard. You're really overworking that graphics card that sits right here, and it's taking a lot of work. So the GPU is doing work where maybe your processor wouldn't. This may be a good board if you're doing a gaming. It says it's gaming. Maybe you only need a 5 here or a 7. Maybe on this one for production, the 7 or 9 or whatever we're going to get. I think I'll probably go with the 9 instead of the 7 just because I can get a higher frequency. But the memories are going to be the same. The layouts are the same from this. We still have our 4 serial ATAs here and here, and they will also do RAID. These connections are all the same down at the bottom. But notice in their marketing, they're showing the support for the fans, and over here they're talking the same basic thing, but they throw in that little extra heat sink because it is a primary difference between the two. So which one is the more expensive one now? Has it changed? Has it always been the same? And here's an exploded view. They're kind of showing you the same thing left and right. A lot more color on the gaming one. You see 6 is the bottom heat sink. Bottom heat sinks is 2 over here. 4 is the top heat sink. Here we have 3 is the top heat sink. This is 2 pieces here and here. This is 1 piece here. You get the idea. They're virtually identical boards. A little bit different in the audio. A little bit different in the heat sinks and how they're laid out and whether or not we have some cooling. Now, I will notice this. Do you see too, we have this bar that goes through. This is a cooling pipe. Number 2 is a heat pipe that goes between this VRM cooler and this stack right here looks like. On this side, you notice it doesn't seem to show that, does it? Now, I'm going to reuse this picture in just a minute, but you'll notice the one on the right is the Phantom Gaming. That's the one that has the heat pipe. The Taichi Lite on the other side has some additional holes right up on the upper end. That may help with some ventilation. So that may be a little bit of a difference there in the cooling as well. So, you know, you can study your diagrams and do it. The biggest thing I want to look at is one last time, if I can find it, is what that little back sight when you're looking at it. That's where you'll find a lot of the details in these different priced boards. The bottom ones, they may have a lot of little USB 2.0s. Some of the better boards may not even have a 2.0 connection back there. You may have to have it through a header to your case somewhere. And that's great because we really don't need to be in 1990 something if we can help it, something old and slow. But yet, if you have something that's only a connector by 2.0, it's better not to have some sort of a special cable to get that done. So I think you'll find more premium, higher speed connections on the upper boards than on the lower ones. But you need to learn how to recognize them and see what you've got going on there. And just to beat a dead horse a little bit more, they both have exactly the same Lightning gaming ports. All this one looks like it's got blue, while this one over here is on the yellow side. They're silk screened a little bit different, but they got the same thing. If your table rat is not running smoothly, they got some very high speed ports for the gaming connection. And here we see that there is definitely 2 different chips on the birthing person board. They are actually built different. This uses the Taichi Lite, uses the ESS, the Saber 9219, and we also see that this is done with the Nahimic by Steel Series. So these are 2 different companies. If you Google them, they will tell you they're 2 different companies. And of course, we knew that one is 5.1, the other 7.1 audio. So they're just different chips. They're populated a little bit differently. There is a difference in that board. I don't know. This one may actually be more expensive because it's 7.1, or maybe this one is better if it has higher impedance up to 600 ohms that the Nahimic won't do. See, that's what we don't know. Which one of these is the better choice, the better constructed? Which one is $50 more? Well, there we are. That concludes this show. Now, we started out looking at the website and going to a little bit of basics, such as, you know, what the chipsets were and the sockets and that sort of thing, a little bit of history, get an idea a little bit about that so you don't feel quite so unprepared if you've not been familiar with computers through the years. So that, I hope, wasn't a waste of time. Then we started getting into how do we really differentiate so that we're not paying too much money for something we don't really need, nor missing out on something we do because we don't really understand the subtle differences between the boards. Then in this show, we went through and actually looked at some subtle differences between the boards, and it's a deep dive. Hardware Unboxed said they did 50 boards, tested 50 boards, 890 boards, Z890 boards, and, you know, so these are the same board. Well, they're obviously not the same board, but the differences are very subtle. And if you're looking at 50 different boards, there's no way in the world that you could do a deep dive on all of them to know what you're getting into. Now, the next show, we're going to look deeply, combining all of this that we've gotten now into when we look at doing a raid. So anyway, I don't know if I'll do a raid, but I'm thinking about doing one, and there's definitely some considerations that without going too deep and just using what we have at our fingertips, we can do something with that. So thank you. Appreciate you sticking with me.